Welcome to another edition of Turn 6 Garage, and today we're discussing the 20 grand dilemma. A common thing for many used car shoppers are looking for a $20,000 small medium car that's reliable, cheap to run, and fuel efficient. And they'll commonly fall to three cars: the Toyota Corolla, the Mazda 3, and the Honda Civic. There are also others in the competition, but in terms of reliability, fuel efficiency, quality, and drivability, these three have always been the top three for most used car shoppers. So, in this video I'm going to investigate, for $20,000 in an automatic, which one should you buy? This is 20k auto, base engine, Corolla, Civic, Mazda 3. For the performance-orientated driver, the Mazda is your choice. It's the quickest from 0 to 100 in 8.2 seconds and has the most power at 114 kilowatts. The Corolla is next, 104 kilowatts and 0 to 108.8 seconds, with the Honda trailing behind at 9.4 seconds to 100 and 103 kilowatts. However, these numbers are not to be sneezed at. Remember, a Ferrari Mondial 40 years ago went from 0 to 100 in 8.1 seconds, so these cars are actually reasonably quick, and in real-world driving, they have more than enough performance to keep up with traffic and to have a bit of fun with. Next thing to think about is practicality. Now, the Mazda again does very well in terms of front and rear space. It's definitely the most spacious, and the boot's pretty reasonable as well. The front and rear of the Toyota is also pretty spacious in terms of accommodation and height, but the boot in the hatchback is a bit on the pokey side. Now, the Honda does have a pretty good boot both in sedan and hatch form, but that sloped off, rakish looking three-quarter line really does cut the rear headroom. Having said that though, the Honda does have quite good rear legroom as well. In terms of styling, there isn't really much to choose between the three of them. They're pretty common looking cars and they're not really going to set your heart racing. But on the plus side, they're definitely not offensive. So that's a good thing. So when you look at these cars in the showroom, there's nothing that's really going to put you off. So go for a test drive. And this is where you start to notice a lot of differences between the three cars. The Toyota turns pretty well, but the ride's a little choppy and it's a bit boomy. The NVH with that CVT isn't especially brilliant and it needs a bit more sound deadening. But on the whole, it's okay. The Mazda really does shine here. It turns really well. Even though the ride isn't brilliant, the steering is actually a very, very good thing on that car. When you take the Mazda on a windy road, you really notice how good that car is in terms of steering. And I will say this, if you do go for the Mazda, plump for a good set of tyres. Some of the cheaper tyres really, really undersell the car. You'd enjoy driving it on a tight road. However, one thing you will notice on it is on a long journey, that driver's seat's a little narrow and you'll find it to be a little boomy. The Corolla is a bit more comfortable in terms of seating position than the Mazda. So if you're looking for longer distance driving, you might favour the Toyota. The Honda, in the 10th gen Civic at least, is third in this lot. For a very simple reason. That electric steering, in my view, does not inspire any confidence. Especially in the wet. I've driven 10th gens in the wet and I just haven't felt confident in the car. The steering doesn't feel like it's attached to the wheel. The ride, while it's pretty good, you feel kind of insulated from the driving experience. And to me, that really, really would put me off the Civic. And that 1.8 in CVT, what a drone. It just doesn't sound that nice. It doesn't make a nice noise, it makes a noise, not one that you actually want to hear. Which is quite disappointing because Honda Civic used to be a byword for fun, cheap car. It appears that the engineers of the old Civics went to work for Mazda, because that's exactly what the Mazda feels like, an old Civic. So, what about the reliability? Well, the Corolla and the Civic both are equipped with the CVT transmission. I am not a fan of these, and one thing I will say is these two are actually pretty good for CVTs. However, as I've said before, change the transmission fluid, because if you don't do that, that's how they break. Don't maintain a CVT, it blows up and that's a $5,000 repair. Yup. So make sure when you're driving both the Corolla and the Civic, you don't feel for any transmission slippage, i.e. retardation of acceleration so the thing will not pull off quite well, or any vibration, or like the engine's revving but not moving, a sort of freewheeling feel. That's how you'll know that there might be an issue with the transmission. And if it does have an issue with the transmission, walk away from that car. If you do go for one, change the fluid every 50 to 60,000 kilometers. And when you buy it, change it the minute you pick the car up. The Mazda's not perfect either. It has pressure control valve issues, and of course, there's a couple of dodgy Sky Actives floating around, but mostly they're in the 2.5s. So, and again, little things here and there with the Mazda, a couple of trim issues you've had with earlier cars, BM series cars, and the infotainment systems in all three. Make sure they all work, 'cause if they don't work, you're going to have to spend a couple of grand to sort them out. The Honda also has an issue with the air conditioning condenser. There likes to be little holes that develop in them, particularly in the 16, 17 cars. So when you get in the Civic, turn the aircon on and make sure it blows cold. If it doesn't, you're probably looking at a replacement condenser. On the whole, though, they're not bad. As long as you maintain them, they'll look after you. So that's a good thing. And what to pay for them. So if you do choose to buy one, what should you pay for one of these cars? Well, $20,000 in a Corolla hatchback buys you a 2017, 2018 car, base ascent, with about anywhere from 65 to 110,000 kilometers. 20 grand in a Mazda 3 buys you a 16 to 18 BN Series 3, anywhere from 65 to 150,000 kilometers. And in the Civic, that buys you a 16 to 17 1.8 in base VTI trim with anywhere from 70 to 130,000 Ks. So they are comparable in age, and in terms of condition, well, there's more Corollas and Mazdas to pick from. You're just going to have a bigger choice of car here, because the Civics, there's a few falling under 20, but there's not as many as the other two. So because they sold so many of the other two in the Mazda and the Corolla, feel free to be picky, because you have plenty of cars. The Honda, not so much. You'll have to step into an older car with the older torque converter gearbox. Now, not that that's necessarily a bad thing. So, for $20,000, there's plenty of choice in these cars. But, should there be another car on your shopping list? Well, I think there should be. The Suzuki Baleno. Now, many of you will think this is an odd choice because you can get an i30, a Cerato, Pulsar, Cruise, Astra, Focus. Yeah, all of those cars I've mentioned all have a significant question mark on them vis-a-vis the engine or the transmission. Yep. You're putting your money against those cars, but you're buying a car that is questionable at best. So hence why I've said the Suzuki. Now, it is a 1.4, but in terms of size, it's not that much smaller than the Corolla and the Mazda. It is a little bit smaller in the front than the Honda, and it's a lot newer and has fewer kilometers. So in terms of the same size of car, or similar size at least, you're buying a smaller engine, 1.4 this time around, and a very outdated 4-speed automatic gearbox. But at least it's very simple. And for $20,000, you can buy a 21 or 22 Baleno with 20 to 50,000 kilometers. And it still has manufacturer's guarantee on it. Something that these cars, on the whole, at $20,000 are unlikely to have. That's where the Suzuki really does make a lot of sense. It's not that much smaller, but you get a newer car and newer warranty, which is a good thing. So, cards on the table, which one of these cars would I buy? I'd buy the Mazda. Personally, it's my favourite of the three. The performance and the driving dynamics really sell the Mazda over the other two to me. That's why I got my grandma one 5 years ago. But that's not to say the other two are bad cars. It's down to personal preference, and if you like either of the other two, then go for them. They're both good cars, and of course, as long as you look after them, they'll look after you. Thank you for watching, and if you like what we do, remember to like and subscribe.